Election 2007. I'm Mike Morrissey, Community Outreach Director here at WCTV, bringing you live coverage. We are live on the air. We're going to be doing wall-to-wall coverage, which, well, in this election isn't that long, thankfully. We're not going coast to coast as they do. I don't think we have to worry about red states or blue states or any other colors at this point. We're going to be going over the entire ballot with you. We're going to be looking at all of the races. We're going to be getting the results live from Town Hall. In a little while, you'll be seeing the live shot we have up there. We have a reporter up there. And with me tonight, I have a color commentator. And he's going to be, I'll be doing the play-by-play, put it into a sports motif. And I'll have a great color commentator working with me. He's a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. He also ran for selectman a couple of times, Mr. Carl Sagel. And I want to welcome you this evening to our coverage here on WCTV. How are you, Carl?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have somebody here that knows a lot about Wilmington. I'm going to first confess that I am not a member of, or I'm not a resident of Wilmington. I began working here as Community Outreach Director about 3, 4, 5 months ago. Learned an awful lot about the community in that time. This is my first election coverage here. I've done election coverages with the town of Sudbury, the town of Lexington where I live. And this is the first shot I've had at doing something with Wilmington. So, of course, every single community has its own little niches and its nuances. And learning all the candidates, I've had the great thing about covering them is I've been able to go and work with the debates that took place about a week ago. Got to learn an awful lot about the school committee and the Board of Selectmen races. And today, got a chance to go around and actually spoke to all 4 of the candidates that are running for the Board of Selectmen, which is usually the star, the star of the ballot there, the top of the ballot, the top of the ticket. And Carl, let's start by going over the ballot as we await the results. And let's work from the bottom up. Well, not that it's a less important position in the town, because anybody that runs, first of all, that's running for any of these seats, deserves our congratulations for #1, putting their name on the ballot. #2, going out there, and a lot of them go door to door. They meet people at the supermarkets, on the street corners, and they talk issues, which is the most important thing, and they bring the issues out. And so everybody that's on this ticket deserves, first of all, our accolades and our congratulations. So let's start congratulating it for first having good races with the Housing Authority. Now, this is because there was a seat that was resigned. I'm confused, so I'm not even going to try to decipher this, Carl. So why don't we, along with you, go over the ticket and first explain to me who's on the ballot, why they're on the ballot, and how many people are on the ballot. Let's go through it in that particular order.
Well, okay. Unfortunately, I don't have the complete ballot with me, but the Housing Authority, I believe there is a unexpired 3-year term. Now, the terms are 5, and there was a person that resigned. Leona Bombard is running for that one seat that is the 3 years left of that term. She's running unopposed, so shouldn't be too much of a decision making on that one. Makes it easier. Makes it easier. Now, there's also a 5-year term, and I believe there are 2 people working for that one seat, Matthew Cox and Ruth Reed.
Okay, that's one I don't have here, so I'll write that down. Now, obviously now we have 2 people. This is the first race going for the Housing Authority for the full 5-year term.
Right.
That means they've been out there. I've seen a few signs for Matthew Cox and a few for Ruth Reed. That's kind of the exposure I get to most of them when I'm driving through town back and forth. And that's a good race. And also we've got a redevelopment authority. That's an open seat, so we're only going to have write-in candidates. So we have no idea who's going to be written in. So it's if you voted out there and you put in some write-in candidates and a write-in campaign was put together, that's something that person has to be congratulated for. So the toughest campaign, believe it or not, to do is a write-in campaign. We also have, let's go in a little bit into the school, into the school boards. The first one is the Shawshene Regional Vocational Technical School Committee, and Robert, is it Peterson or Pedersen?
I believe it's Peterson.
Okay, Robert Peterson of Stonehenge Drive is, from what I've got from the ballot, is running unopposed. So,
right. Now, he's been on that board before.
So he gives his own vote, he's in there. That's probably the best part about running unopposed. You
Right,
can win
that's
it
true.
all by yourself without any troubles whatsoever.
It's fairly difficult to lose.
Yeah, well, that's also a good one. So let's go over the next one. Next one up, we're going to be talking about and going over on the ballot is the school committee.
Right.
And this is a pretty interesting race. I watched the debates down at the town hall, which was supposed to be right in this room behind me, but we had a lot of flooding here during that big rainstorm, and we couldn't get it in here because electrical wires and people walking around isn't always the safe thing to do. So we made sure that we very quickly, and our technical director and guru and wizard, Bill Robert, somehow in less than 48 hours pulled that entire thing off technically, and I'm still scratching my head trying to figure out how he did it. But at the debate up at the town hall, we had all 4 candidates. There's 4 people vying for 3 seats.
For 3 seats,
So
exactly.
potentially, we have a chance of an incumbent being knocked out of that. So let's go over them. We have the 3 incumbents. Who's at the top of the list on that one?
Daniel Ardito is one of the incumbents. Joan Duffy and Margaret Kane are the 3 incumbents that are currently on those 3 seats.
Okay.
Their challenger is Judith O'Connell.
Well, obviously Judith hasn't, she probably has a track record. How about Ardito, Duffy, and Kane? How long have they been on the school committee that you can recollect at this point? Couple of terms, or?
Yes, all of them are seasoned members. I believe they've all been on for more than 1 term.
Okay, so Judith O'Connell really has her work cut out for her to try to, a 1-term incumbent sometimes is a little bit easier to knock out in a campaign, to use, I'm going to use some campaign terms. Being knocked out means you get voted out. And a 1-term incumbent usually is sensed as the weakest incumbent because they've been in office for 1 term. Sometimes it's like a rookie. You can make some rookie mistakes the first time out in the first term, and usually by the 2nd term they say you can get it right and keep going, or you haven't built up your constituency enough and your supporters enough, or sometimes your early supporters can wane off and go to somebody else because they feel right off at the beginning after a little while that that you're not representing them properly. So Judith, I've seen a couple of her signs around. I've seen a couple of her lawn signs around, and I did have a chance to say hello to Daniel Ardito this afternoon. Margaret Kane was also in the area when I went to a couple of the polling places. So that's one that's going to be very closely watched. Hopefully, we're going to get some information from that on the town hall. I don't know if we're looking at it right now, but it's probably a bit of a hustle and bustle up there because usually about 10 minutes past, people come off the polling places and head right for the town hall and start heading for room 9 and doing that. And by the way, while we're up there, let's talk a little bit about room 9. I hear we have Franklin Tucker of the Wilmington Advocate who's going to be helping us out up there and giving us some interviews and talking to some of the candidates afterwards and getting some of their backgrounds and reactions. Now, top of the ticket, let's go over that one. We have the selectmen's race. Now, I know from every town I've ever been in and worked in my own town that I've lived in 2 times, been in 2 different towns in the last 20 years, voted in, even helped some campaigns a little bit. The selectmen tends to be the glamour part of the campaign, well, selectmen and school committee, because they tend to control a lot of the issues in the town. And who do we got on the top of the ballot, Carl?
Well, on that ballot we have Michael Newhouse, who is incumbent several terms in the past. This will be his 4th campaign, I believe. Suzanne Sullivan, who has also been on for more than just the last term. This will be her 3rd campaign. Lou Samaglia, I believe this is his 1st campaign in Wilmington. I'm not too familiar with his public service outside of Wilmington, but I know he's a newcomer to the Wilmington market. And Frank West, and this is also Frank's 4th campaign. Frank was a 1-term selectman, and he's only been out of the seat for 1 year, so he's recently sat in room 9, so he's pretty familiar with a lot of the topics and a lot of what's going on. But this is his 4th campaign, like I said, so we have some pretty seasoned campaigners in this run.
Yeah, that's what struck me about this campaign. More than anything else, it's 2 incumbents who are, I'll say, entrenched, using the kind of, again, political term there. They've got some constituency background. They've got some people who are helping them, advocates, if you want to use that term. They've got some backers. And they seem to have slightly different groups of followers following him now. Lou Somaglia is new, but he seems to be getting a lot of support out there. And Frank West, who was a selectman up until a year ago, he also knows what it's like to win and lose. From the looks of it, I believe he was voted out in the last campaign. Probably, I think it was a pretty close election a year ago. So maybe he's, it could have been one term again. Then you get sort of the, maybe not the rookie mistake, but sort of going for that sophomore year or sophomore term tends to be where you tend to have a little bit of the problems getting back in. Excuse me one sec. So he understands that, and now he may have rebuilt his base of support, and he's going back at that. Now, again, today we had a chance to go out and talk to a lot of the people who were running, actually, in the Board of Selectmen's race. So we went out and figured, okay, let's ask them a couple of questions, actually 3 questions. And it was kind of interesting in speaking to them all. You could see, and I'm not going to say who, you could see some of them were, actually all of them looked pretty nervous about the campaign. I don't think anybody believes they're 100% safe. Having 2 people going for 4 seats really kind of mixes it up. And Carl, why don't you, as you know, you've run for office. When you ran, was it, 4 people going for 2 seats, 3 people going for 1, 1-on-1? I mean, how does that differ in your mind to have, 4 going on 2 this time around?
Well, with 4 people running for 2 seats, it really changes the dynamic quite a bit. Obviously, we talked earlier about unopposed candidacies being much easier. Yep. But a lot of times when there's a lot of people running for just 1 or 2 seats, that also really changes it quite a bit. It doesn't pair off the same way. You have to shine from a field, and there's a number of people that have commented, like at the debates, where several people had similar perspectives on the town. So that what happens is you wind up with a difficult time separating yourself from the crowd, kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that are going on in town. There's a lot of issues in town, and there's actually a fair amount of consensus as to what needs to be done. So the difficulty in a large group is to separate yourself from the rest of the group, especially if there is no particular or no individual topic that seems to be something that you can rally yourself behind as being very different than the solution that other people came up with. Yeah. These are very different candidates, I should say. Oh, yeah. But I find that some people do very well in a very large group, and other people do better when it's kind of more of a one-on-one kind of combat.
Could be that, I mean, theoretically, you could see the number 1 candidate getting 27–28% of the vote, and the number 4 candidate getting 23–24% of the vote. And exactly. That literally could break up that close. And I also noticed that even just driving around through town, you look at some of the lawns and there are 2 signs, and you'll see a Michael Newhouse and Lou Somaglia sign on one lawn. You go, a few blocks down or even a couple of doors down, you may see a Newhouse and a Frank West sign side
exactly.
by side. And what happens is anybody that walks in now has to say, okay, I got to pick 2. I like Suzanne and Lou, maybe I'll go with those 2, or I like Suzanne and Frank, or I like Michael and Lou, and it breaks it up a lot. So you literally could see through this, somebody barely getting 30%. Chances are, somebody's going to get a little bit more than 30, and somebody's probably going to have, right around 20–25. But that can happen. But as we went around today, so again, it was great to go around. First of all, folks, if you didn't get out and vote, do not blame the weather. That was your fault. It was a beautiful day today. So as we had a chance to go around through the town today, we decided to ask them questions. And the first question is, obviously, they just came off the campaign trail. So they spent many, many months, everything from, as they say, door knocking to going to supermarkets and shaking hands, maybe standing by the train stop, just about any place where campaigning's done. You get the coffees and the meetings and the debates. So we decided to ask all 4 of the Board of Selectmen candidates to what they're what they looking back on the campaign, what it was like for them, and see what they had to say about running in this particular campaign.
That was also new at this, and they've done a wonderful job. Got out there, worked. A lot of people worked very hard, and I'm very grateful and be happy to serve them. Oh, I'd say the past few months have been great. I've been out there, I've been doing some door knocking, walking around, talking to some people, plus just walking around town just because I'm around town anyway, and just, kind of getting viewpoints on different people and seeing what they feel the issues in town are. I've received many phone calls of support, and just overall, I think it's been a great experience. I love doing this.
It's been going well. You just have your checklist of items to take care of, and to this point, we've done everything that we set out to do. So we'll just see how it goes.
We've had a lot of participation, a lot of people volunteering. We've built up a lot of momentum. It's been a good campaign. We've run a good, clean campaign.
Well, that's what I caught. More than anything else in this campaign, the one thing you've got to congratulate those 4 candidates, and actually even the school committee candidates, the candidates all the way up and down the ballot, was this, from everything that I've read, was literally, to say, one good, clean campaign. And even having been involved with some very good mudslinging campaigns. For the media, those are very, very entertaining. And I've worked in statewide media and literally seen the mud balls come flying over my head while I was on a camera watching 2 candidates in the same area. It's a lot of fun to watch, but it's not always necessarily the best thing for a nice community like Wilmington. And it's Carl. I mean, how do you reflect on that? If all 4 of the candidates are running, a campaign where they don't try to differentiate themselves, there isn't a lot of negatives going back and forth, and how then does the electorate look and say, okay, how do I differentiate myself from these guys? Is it the good guy comes in first on this one, or do you sometimes the bad guy comes in last? How do you pick a good guy?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know exactly how that's done. I mean, Michael Newhouse is very much a hometown boy. He's one of the guys of the town. Frank West is the same thing. Suzanne moved into the town about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. I myself moved in 10 years ago. So there's a difference between being kind of homegrown and being an import. Lou also is someone that is recently come to the scene, but Lou has a tremendous base in not running for selectman so much as being the veterans agent. He has a real good base with that. Frank is very active in other civic events within the town. He was on the Historic Commission forever, and he's involved with several other organizations within town. So, and Suzanne is also, she's on the Streams Committee, and she's very well known for her ecological bent within the town. Again, Michael Newhouse was town council, and he's very much part of the town. So what happens, I think, that when you don't have a contentious race, then people fall back on their other draws and their other factions as to how they have support from other areas other than necessarily their own campaign. That would be my guess as to how they differentiate themselves.
Well, so this is maybe a campaign of the backgrounds of the candidates, or what's going to shine through.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah, and that potentially is a good thing, because now, I mean, given we have 2 incumbents, people know what their work is like while they're on the Board of Selectmen, but they may look at Lou Simagli. Actually, we have almost 3 incumbents if you consider Frank West is just out of the office a year ago.
Right.
We know what his record is. Somebody like Louis Simaglia comes in, you're looking at his background. Okay, his background in this, how does it then correspond if he becomes a member of the Board of Selectmen? With his background, it obviously would be a good fit, because I don't think he would be running for it, and he seemed to have a lot of support. A lot of backers out there want to see him in that particular position due to what they feel he's done in the past in other areas. So that's something that's there. And again, it's a lot based on issues. So obviously then, question number 2, when I was out talking to the candidates today, looking at the issues. Every single one of them seemed to have a bit of a pet issue that they wanted to go through. I heard about 3 or 4 different issues while I was asking this particular question, which isn't unusual. They all have a good opinion of something that they feel their base constituency, their base support will go to the polls, because it puts a little fire in the belly of some people that are their backers. So basically, we asked the very simple question: if there was one big issue, what was the one that was going to make their people go out and vote? What was the issue that was going to bubble up to the surface?
Field space. I think field space would be a big issue. We obviously need it right now. This morning there's probably over 3,000 kids that are going to be playing on the fields all day today in this town. So it's something that's grown immensely. A lot of the younger teams, the farm teams in Little League and the smaller soccer teams, the younger soccer teams are huge. There's huge numbers in all the sports in town here now. It's going to be very important to give them a space to play.
One of the main issues that people have told me about is just that the whole board has gone stagnant. You know, if you look at the board themselves, the board really hasn't really done a lot for the population, for the people here in Wilmington lately. That you know, from what I'm getting for phone calls and from what I'm seeing, you know, there's a lot of infighting going on, a lot of trying to get a little bit more control of the board more than actually working in support of the people. You know, a quick example of that is, you know, we got major lawsuits going on in the town with several different environmental issues plus our normal course of events. And we get the board more or less talking to themselves, talking to the, getting town council involved so that they can talk about, who's talking to town council off the record more than, hey, town council, I really want to talk about the issues, what's going on with our suits. And that's what I'm seeing around town, is that, it's just, like I said, the board is basically being stagnant.
I wouldn't say there's been any one issue. I'd say there's consistently been a number of issues like the possibility of a fire substation in North Wilmington, the need for increased field space for youth athletics and our high school athletes, and of course there's some important environmental issues that we'll continue to work on over the next several years.
I would say the two most discussed issues, I do a lot of door-to-door campaigning, and I think the two things on people's minds mostly are taxes and the water. I think those are the two biggest issues, taxes and water.
Pretty interesting. So we have 5 candidates, and I heard, 4 candidates.
Right.
Sorry about that, I'm not even counting properly. I got to use my fingers. The thumb is the 5th. 4 candidates talking about 5 different issues, and that kind of made of interest to me. Frank West mentioned the stagnancy of the Board of Selectmen. That may be kind of an opinion issue, which is fine. And a couple of the candidates, Louis Samaglia was talking about the fields, and on a day like today, we were pretty close to two fields down at the town hall in the was it the Westland Elementary or Westland Middle School, with all the fields around there. You had to think about those fields, so that wasn't too far off base for him. And again, one of the things he said was, and you thought about it just because the weather was beautiful, and then all of a sudden you see all the young people running around. He's saying 3,000 people are going to use the fields that day. So until you start thinking about the numbers, and once they're presented to you that way, you kind of get a grasp of the issue and how you could, fields for the young people to play on and keep them busy, keep them out of trouble. Obviously, exercise is great. Today was the most beautiful day this spring so far to exercise in. That could seem like a very big issue. Another issue came up, taxes. That's a perennial favorite that we've seen in just about every campaign. And water, taxes and water is what Suzanne Sullivan was talking about. And this fire substation up in the northern part of Wilmington. Any one of those interest you the most, Carl? Now, if you were running in this election, which one of those do you think you'd pick to push ahead in the forward-most place?
Well, there's a lot of, there is a proposal that's out to redo the high school field with AstroTurf, and there's an artificial turf that's available. It's expensive, but it also gives a lot more usability to that. So that the argument or the conversation about the fields is basically, do you spend the money making a lot more usefulness out of one particular field, and there's a great deal of money involved, or do you try and open up new field space? There's some proposals to open them up at some of the schools that are not being used and some of the other fields in space. So I think everyone might come up with slightly different solutions to field space, but everyone kind of recognizes that field space is a very important issue. With regard to some of the other issues, the water, the lawsuits that Frank West was talking about, these are actually similar issues because there were some contamination issues that caused a problem, obviously, with the town's wells. The town's wells 5 of the 9 wells being shut down due to pollution is what's feeding the water conversation, but it's also feeding a lot of the lawsuit conversation and a lot of the town council conversation, and then of course it feeds right into the MWRA conversation. So a lot of these issues might have more than one title, but they're really kind of all related to each other. I see a lot of that, and of course the MWRA automatically turns into a tax conversation because the taxes and the water bills, the cost of the water becomes an issue at that point. So if I were to pick one, I wouldn't pick one. I'm sorry, that's one of the reasons I'm not running for selectman. I don't have to pick one.
Well, we can presume that you're running for selectman. How's that?
Okay, well, if I were running for selectman, I would obviously be very concerned about the water and the lawsuits, town council representation of the town. Those would be very important issues to me as well. Having 2 children that are, on various soccer teams and whatnot in town, the fields is also an issue for me. My personal solution wouldn't necessarily be the artificial turf. It would be open up more field space. Yeah. But all these things have practical solutions, all these things have practical limitations. So I'd have to do more research on it before I could make a commitment on that.
Okay, well let me look at it from my perspective. Okay, here, again, I'm going to confess to everybody, I'm from Lexington, I'm an out-of-towner, working in this great community, and I can tell you two of the issues in here were very big in Lexington. One would be the fire substation. We actually had 2 fire stations and one closed down in Lexington. And that became a monster issue when we only had the main fire station, which is on the western side of Lexington Center, and people where I am in the eastern part of town near Arlington were feeling a little dangerous there at that point. And fields, yes, we did put in one of those AstroTurf fields, and it wasn't in the main football field. We did another field over and actually had 3 of them put in. Actually, no, excuse me, there was 2 fields put in. And they're both either for soccer and or lacrosse, which are played on them. And they're pretty expensive. That was one thing that I noticed. And they get used, and the great thing about it is they don't break down. So, but I heard there was a survey done by one of the young people down at the high school. They actually did a survey and went around, rather than guessing as to what the kids would like and how they felt, whether they'd want to see turf and or natural grass. And from what I remember and what I read, it was 50-50. They weren't necessarily, you'd think all of a sudden that everybody would want to play on the turf, and it was about 50-50. I think a lot of the young people felt that, yeah, I like it, but the grass is a little softer, a little less on the injuries, and there was a pretty comprehensive report about many of the different issues that are around there. So that pretty much, looking at it from an out-of-town perspective as to, what some of the issues are. Third part, this is kind of a quickie. We had a chance to ask them, it was a little bit going over the same answer in a couple of places. All 4 of the selectmen candidates about, how they think they do. And right around now, they're sitting there probably mopping a little sweat off their brow. Might be a close race, and some of these predictions actually may come true, maybe they won't. But one of the things we decided to ask them is, and it's the perennial question, is we had to ask them how they think they do, and how they think the voters would poll today.
It's a pretty exciting day. The weather's cooperating. We're looking forward to a big turnout.
Overall, I think it's been a great experience. I love doing this. Love helping out our town.
I'll tell you at 8:30.
I think I'm going to do okay. It's never easy to tell. You get out there and you work and you hope for the best. And you work your hardest, and whatever happens, happens. And you can't. I don't ever want to look back and say, well, I should have done this, or I should have done that. We've worked really, really hard, and hopefully it will turn out the right way.
Well, I think I liked, I'm trying to remember who it was. It was Michael Newhouse says, let me know, I'll let you know at 8:30. And I think we're a little bit past that right now. I'm wondering if we're seeing over our shoulder what's going on up at the town hall. A little bit of a hustle and bustle and excitement up there, probably. The room's hopefully filling up. Some excitement is definitely going on.
Actually, if you look at the monitor's on an empty room, so there you go, okay.
Yeah. No, seriously, is it an empty room? If it is, we missed everything.
Yeah, I was going to say they had an empty table for a while, but they got a bunch of people there waiting for the results.
So you've run for Carl Sagel, who's my color commentator tonight, member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. You've run a couple of town-wide campaigns. Right around 8:30, are the butterflies starting to come up in the stomach? Is the brow getting a little bit sweaty, or the fingers twitching and hands shaking from the nerves around this time of night and the hour of the day? You've put all the work in. You've done all the campaigning. You've probably shaken who knows how many hands. It's all in the hands of a few thousand voters. What are your thoughts right about now? If you were even looking back to when you ran, or what do you think some of our candidates are thinking right now?
Well, I believe it does. A lot of it comes down to that. I think, especially the people that incumbents. I think, as a general rule in politics, incumbents have an advantage when there isn't that much of a turnout. Unless there's a big issue that people want change. And like I said, I don't know that there's been that much opportunity for people to really distinguish themselves that much from the other candidates. And I think that works to the advantage of the incumbents in my case, in my opinion. At the same time, like you said, this is where the rubber meets the road kind of thing, and this is where it all comes down. Now, in the times that I ran, the polling machines themselves were a little bit different, so that they would come dribbling in a little bit more. I believe now it's much more computerized and much more pre-assembled when it arrives, when it hits room 9. So I think it's going to come out a little bit more like an announcement, a little bit less like we got it, which was basically each individual machine coming in one at a time, and everybody sitting around, tallying up individual little sheets and comparing the numbers with somebody else. So it's kind of an exciting time.
Well, I know from experience that Wilmington is using the exact same system that most towns are now. It's the optical scanner method. You go into the ballot, and you take a nice paper ballot. This is a pink one. There's going to be a box there. You fill in the box. It slides in. It slides right into the. It slides right through the ballot. It's a reader, kind of similar to what you do when you scan across the supermarket. It reads where you filled in the box, and it just tabulates it from there. And basically, right after 8 o'clock, all they do is open up the back of the box. It's locked up. They open up the back of the box, and it'll tell you, as of, I don't know if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but A, B, C, D. It tells you the results of each candidate. Whether there's a name in there, I don't know, because I haven't had a chance to see them programmed. And it's really rather quick, and then it prints out much like a supermarket receipt. Who does it? And what they also do is they take the absentee ballots and run them through just before the polls close around 8 o'clock, or sometime when it's a little quiet. So literally within 2 or 3 minutes, you've got one precinct printed out, and you've got all the results sitting right there. I've been told that we're probably around 3 to 5 minutes away from getting the results. And that makes the excitement level go up a little bit more. But obviously, if you can get the results out in 35, 40 minutes, that's phenomenal. I think that's something where technology is doing it. And I actually know from working with some of the other methods, some of the computerized methods and touch screens, I actually think that this particular method is the best one. You've got the paper ballot to back up. It's done electronically, so it's very quick. Again, you just take those receipts and you bring them down to the town hall. Sometimes it takes a little while from the two outside of the town hall to be brought in, and they don't call them in, which I think is the best thing to do. You got to have that hard paper copy, and also bring the ballots in themselves. And it could be a close race today. If it has to go into a recount, you've got the paper ballots to back it up, and you can go over one by one if necessary. No hanging chads, folks. That's a good thing. I can remember that from, what was it, 2000? Yeah, Carl.
Right.
That was an interesting race. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I'll throw in my little bit of color here now. One of the issues is there are only 3 polling places in Wilmington, which means that these optical readers, there are only 3 of these readers. In the olden days, each machine had its own printout, so that you might have with the 6 precincts, you might have 2 or 3 machines per precinct, so you'd have a dozen printouts that had to be tabulated. Now there are 3, and one of them is, like you said, already at the town hall. So it really does work pretty well. I was struck by your explanation of how the system works. I have some statistics here that I thought were pretty interesting. Last year, only 16%, that's 2,200 people.
Going live
let's
now.
go live.
Let's go live.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Doing the
6,
microphone check.
7, 8,
And we'll have those,
9.
have a look at those in just a few seconds.
Getting the numbers too. It's been a long day. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming to you live from Town Hall in Wilmington, and I have the results of the April 28th election. Before I read them, I would like to thank all of the poll workers who did an excellent job today. I would like to say that all of the people that were beyond the 150-foot line, all of the candidate supporters behaved in a totally professional manner today, and I congratulate you all. Okay? For Selectman, Michael Newhouse, 1,925 votes. Suzanne M. Sullivan, 1,719 votes. Louis Simiglia, 1,891 votes. Frank J. West, 882 votes. The declared winners of unofficial results right now, we have not done any write-ins or anything like that, but the unofficial results would declare Michael J. Newhouse and Louis Simiglia as the winners of the Selectmen's race for today. For School Committee, Daniel M. Ardito, 1,516. Joan M. Duffy, 1,916. Margaret A. Kane, 2,090. Judith L. O'Connor, 2,171 votes. We are declaring unofficially tonight that Judith O'Connell, Margaret A. Kane, and Joan M. Duffy are the winners of the school committee race for today. For the Housing Authority for a 5-year term, Matthew R. Cox, 1,379 votes. Ruth L. Reed, 1,334 votes. We are declaring Matthew R. Cox the unofficial winner of this evening's race. For Housing Authority, an unexpired term, we have one candidate, Leona C. Bombard, and she received 2,218 votes. For the Office of Redevelopment Authority, those results will be announced on Monday, as it is a write-in candidate, and I need to go through all of the ballots to figure out how many people got votes. At least one person has to have 5 votes to obtain the office. For the Shawshene Vocational Technical School Committee is Robert G. Peterson, running unopposed, and he received 2,650 votes. I'd like to congratulate the unofficial winners this evening. I'd like to thank all of the candidates for running a very professional, positive campaign. And again, I would like to thank my poll workers, that they've had a long day today and they've done an excellent job. The police for handling an unbelievable amount of traffic at Town Hall today, which we will work on for next year's election. And all of you for coming this evening. Thank you very much. I would like to have all of the winners come up, please, to be sworn in.
Interesting. Well, Carl.
Yeah. We've seen 2 incumbents be upset.
Yeah, and the most interesting part of this is, at first, if they had announced the school committee race first, as opposed to the selectmen, I would have thought, first thing is the 3 women won in the school committee race rather handily over the incumbent, Daniel Ardito. That, you know, that shows that 4 on 3 sometimes doesn't always favor the incumbent on that one. And then I would have thought, okay, well that means Suzanne Sullivan's probably in good shape when it comes to the Board of Selectmen's race. But remarkably, Michael Newhouse and Louis Samaglia prevailed in that race fairly close. I think the percentages here are pretty close. We're probably looking at around 30-something. I didn't get a chance to do the math out yet because I would have to add up all of them. A little over 30%. Frank West getting 882 votes on the low end, about 1,000, give or take a little bit, 900 to 1,000 under the other candidates that were in there. First of all, any thoughts, or if we're seeing something over my shoulder, they can. We're getting the swearing in right now. Why don't we go to that live if we get a chance to do that?
Okay. In accordance with the bylaws of the town of Wilmington, the laws of Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the laws of the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, really.
One more second. I'd like to remind all the residents that might be watching this evening that next week, Saturday at 10:30, is the annual town meeting. And if you could please plan to attend, we need your vote. Your vote counts. And we do need a quorum of 150 residents in order to begin the meeting. Thank you very much for a very pleasant day, all of you.
That's very good. Watching, I'll get back to my thing, Michael Newhouse and Lou Samaglia. I noticed from the back there, although we couldn't see him on the front, Michael Newhouse is pretty easy to spot with the shaved head there, and Lou Samaglia being sworn in. I want to congratulate them. Want to congratulate Suzanne Sullivan. I thought she did very, very well in the debates, or in the debate that was at the town hall. She seemed to have a lot of support out there. A bit surprising. What's most surprising is that two of the incumbents were knocked out tonight. And the numbers were actually really close. I'd say, what, about 180, 175, 180 votes difference between Suzanne and Lou Samaglia. That's quite a close race. I think actually the closest race was for the Housing Authority with, what was the number on that, Carl? What was the difference between those two?
I believe Matthew Cox got 1379 and Ruth Reed got 1334. It looks like about 45 votes make a difference.
45 votes out of close to 1,400. That's, let's see, 130 would be 10, 13%. That's only about 3% difference. That's
very close.
Very close. And that's why if anybody wants to run for office, you got to get your supporters out there to vote. If you know somebody's going to vote for you, the #1 job you have is to get the people that are going to vote for you out to those polls the day. I believe it's called GOTV, Get Out the Vote. I've also heard it called IT, Identify and Turn Them Out. I don't know if I hear a screaming and yelling behind you, it means we've got Franklin Tucker up at the town hall, hopefully maybe getting a little bit of an interview with somebody. Just scream and yell at me from the control room if that takes place. One of the things that the town clerk said that's the most important here is that next Saturday is the town meeting. It's at the high school. That's in the auditorium, if I'm not mistaken, Carl. You can jump in.
Actually, they usually have that in the gym.
Okay, well, Jim.
What they do is they set up several hundred chairs and they open up the bleachers when they need to, and I think they can put more people into the gym on folding chairs than they can in the auditorium.
I'm a veteran of about 20 town meetings in 1 year. And so I've seen open town meetings. I live in a town that's a representative town meeting. I know Wilmington has an open town meeting. Therefore, all you need to be is a registered voter. You walk in the door, they check your voter registration, and you're able to vote. You set the town agenda with that. You're the one that makes the big decisions, and then the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, and then it's their job to take what you describe through your vote. to make sure that that happens, and they manage the town for you. So what I think is wonderful about Wilmington as opposed to the town I'm in is that it's an open town meeting, and you actually have a chance to get out there and make the decision. So just like our town clerk, who did a wonderful job in mentioning this, get out next Saturday. Of course, I'm going to plug that WCTV is going to have live coverage of that, but that should not stop you from heading down to the gymnasium down at the high school right around the corner from us here, and make sure that you get in there and you do the vote. You actually can see it a lot better live and in person. You get a chance to actually do some support, I believe. Usually something like the Cub Scouts or the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts are down there selling coffee, donuts. They usually have bake sales. So not only do you get a chance to run your town and make sure the decisions are made that you want to see made, you can support some organizations and get in there and make sure that that's done. I got to tell you, Carl, something that's interesting. Let's get on to a little bit of a funny note today. The one thing that surprised me the most, and I don't know if this is just inherent to right here in Wilmington, but one of the things that the town clerk was talking about was keeping the people back the 150 feet from the polling booth. Now, there's a state law in Massachusetts that anybody that has anything to do with helping a candidate, whether it's handing out leaflets or standing there with a sign, has to stay back 150 feet. And the one thing that I noticed was there was this big white line, like a big circle 150 feet from the door, and it was quite prominent, and I should have got some video of it. Well, hopefully we're running some video of some people standing behind that line. And it was this big wide arc, and the funniest thing that I saw is outside of the town hall, it ran right up to a tree and into the woods that are on the side. And as I was talking to, I believe it was either Michael Newhouse or Suzanne Sullivan, because they were the ones I got a chance to interview at the town hall. And I joked to one of them and said, you know, as I pointed to the line literally going up to this tree in the woods that's on the left, and he said, oh, on the other side it does run up the tree, so nobody sits in the tree and bothers somebody going in out of the trees or the squirrels or something like that. And we're going to go up to Franklin Tucker right now, and he can jump in and interview anybody he wants, if that's what's being screamed at me by Bill Roberts.
Well, you should know that everybody's left. Everybody's going to celebrations, or they're going home quietly for a little after-election meal. Any impressions I would have, I would say, the first thing I realized it was not Suzanne's day or night was because she did not show up. She's usually the first one here. She's usually very gregarious, but she just didn't show up to town hall, and that's surprising. And that kind of told us that there was going to be a close race.
Thank you. Were you able to hear me down there, Franklin?
Oh, anything else? It was a good campaign. I think everybody was very positive. There wasn't any negative campaigning. There seemed to be issues in terms of professionalism, as Mike Newhouse was promoting, and he seemed to carry the day through that mantra of his. He's also a well-known person in town, so it was pretty clear that he was going to be one of the two top vote getters. It was really a race between Lou and Susanna, and it turned out that I think it wasn't more of a situation where people wanted change. It was just that Lou's a really well-known, popular person who people decided that they were going to put a little bit of their trust into. And I think that's what eventually put him over the top. In terms of the school committee, I think Judy O'Connell just shows a great presence, a real vigor, something that I guess she brought out in her softball days, both in college and high school, because she's just focused, and you can see that she has a lot to bring to the school committee. So that turned out to be I think a winning combination when she went to voters. But also, and I think Mr. Cox, I doubt if we can call him Mr. because he's so young, but that should be interesting to see the new generation of elected official come to Wilmington.
Very good. We appreciate that, Franklin. Actually, that's a great synopsis. That's I love when people put sports curves on things and sports metaphors into things. And as you said, Judith O'Connell, back from her softball playing days. Carl, do you think that during the debate she was able to handle not only the curveball, maybe able to hit it over the fence on top of that?
I believe that she obviously did. In her bio, though, it's pretty obvious that she's an accomplished, or she was recently an accomplished athlete. I think where that might be some of it, because she's mentioned it herself, that she uses a lot of the same attitude and perspective that allowed her to excel in sports, also allows her to excel in other areas as well.
So maybe we couldn't call her the soccer mom. She might be the softball mom.
That would be appropriate, yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's maybe there's going to be a new phrase, help me with the word. I'm trying to think of what we could call it. The softball mom may come out of here, or, potentially other sports moms and dads that are going to come out of this and make sure. Let's, Bill, if you got the numbers up, let's go over the numbers again. Let's start with, if you can scream and yell at me, let's start from the top down, because I know you've got the selectmen's race. Let's put them up on the screen if you can, and let's go over them. We'll go over a quick talk about them a little bit, Carl. Maybe we'll wrap things up after that. But in the Board of Selectmen's race, Michael Newhouse, who is the incumbent, he came out on top with the #1 amount of votes with 1,925. He's the incumbent. He was the #1 vote getter. Second on the ballot, if we will go from the top to the bottom on the ballot, was Suzanne Sullivan. She got 1,719 votes. I thought it was interesting that Franklin Tucker said it just wasn't her day. I can tell you that when I interviewed her, she seemed to be the one that was a bit nervous at the time now. I would have thought maybe because we were standing pretty close to the street, but there were a lot of trucks going by at the time. That potentially could have been the nerves, because actually we were pretty close to the street and there were a lot of trucks going by at the time. But as Franklin Tucker said, she didn't show up for the results, so she might have got a handle that something was going on. That put her in third place. Lou Somaglia, who is a newcomer, as you said, maybe new enough not to have either been on the board as Frank West was or an incumbent. He came in second with 1,891 votes. And probably the person who maybe really wasn't his day. He's been on the boards before. He's won a couple of elections, at least one election that I know of. You might be able to correct me on that, Carl. Frank West, who came in with 882 votes. To me, that's a little bit surprising, because I would have thought that he might have gotten a few more and everybody else might have gotten a few less votes. Potentially, and just from an outsider looking in, it looked like it was potentially going to be a little bit closer of a race. Did that kind of surprise you? I mean, the top three are pretty close. There's, let's see, 17, barely 200, literally 206 ballot difference between #1 and #3, and really that's where it's going from.
Well, Lou and Mike. Michael Newhouse obviously has the strongest machine in political machine, and Lou and Mike did a lot of co-campaigning, if you will, or they're individuals and all that. But I know Lou took advantage of Mike helping with the machine, and a lot of the same. They travel in a lot of the same circles. They have some of the same base, and I believe that Suzanne's base is a different base, and I think there's an advantage to that. I don't think that it's a surprise that Michael Newhouse coming in a strong leader is separate or as separate from Lou's success as it would have been much more of a surprise to me if it turned out to be Suzanne coming in with the highest vote count and then Lou and Mike having the runoff. That would have been much more of a surprise to me, because I believe that a lot of the same base, like I said, would help Lou and Michael. Frank, on the other hand, last year when he was voted out, he had 774 votes, so he actually did better in this particular election than he did in the election that he lost last year. So that says for his machine that he picked up well over 100 extra votes, and as you said before, 100 and change is what makes the difference between winning and losing. So he showed well. He just didn't show quite well enough.
Well, that's actually, I mean, looking to the future, Frank West, maybe in a year or two, you know, he may tap into Lou and Mike's base of support. You know, he seems to be a little bit more leaning into their category. I know one thing that Frank was saying, there was stagnancy in the Board of Selectmen, and obviously from the vote, it looked like potentially he was correct about that because there was an incumbent that was voted out. So maybe he just wasn't identifying the particular issues that, you know, that the people who were out there voting today decided was stagnant, and potentially it's identifying the issues as well. Let's go down to the school committee now, the other big race, and look at the numbers for that. And up the top of the ticket, but coming in fourth, was Daniel Ardito. That's a bit surprising to me. Joan Duffy, who again an incumbent, as Dan Ardito was, she came in, let's see, third overall with 1,916 votes. Margaret Kane, she's the third incumbent. She came in second overall with 2,090, and probably, I think, the surprise of the night, Judith O'Connell, who hadn't held office before, from what I understand, or maybe not a town-wide office of this level, was the #1 vote getter with 2,171. What's interesting is, and I know Bill Robert behind me would probably cue up the song in the second I say it, and at least on the school committee side, it looked like it was ladies' night. And I know he's thinking Kool and the Gang at this point, but don't play it, please. We want to have a little fun once in a while. But that, you know, probably doesn't have a lot to do with, you know, whether it's a man or a lady. I think this was very much issue-driven and very much constituency-based driven. I don't think it pretty much split that way. But those are the numbers on that. So Joan Duffy, Margaret Kane, and a newcomer, Judith O'Connell, are your three new school committee members. Again, Michael Newhouse holds on to his seat for another term in the Board of Selectmen, and Louis Simaglia is the new member of the Board of Selectmen. On some of the other ones, and if you've got the numbers up there behind me, that's great. In the Housing Authority, there was the unexpired 3-year term that's left. Leona Bombard, I hope I'm saying her name right, 2,218, which is interesting because all of these got the winners of a couple of the seats here that weren't done, gives you pretty much how many votes were out there. 2,218 for her. The Housing Authority, a 5-year term. This is where Matthew Cox was running, and it sounded to me like Matthew was a younger person, and maybe it's the next generation coming up against Ruth Reed. This was the closest race of the night. Matthew Cox, 1,379 votes. Ruth Reed, 1,334. And if my math is correct, there's only 45 vote difference. So that's only maybe 2 or 3% difference, maybe a little over 3% difference on that. When it comes to the Redevelopment Authority, that's a 5-year term. This is what surprises me, is that it was a completely open seat. Nobody came out and decided to run. It was a sticker campaign, or a write-in campaign. Sticker campaign, if you don't know that, use a sticker instead of writing it in. So it's nice computer printed stickers, and that way they don't get messed up, and you don't have to worry about if you misspelled the name of somebody that you're wanting to write in for. That obviously is going to take a few days to compile. As it said, somebody has to get at least 5 votes. Let's hope that doesn't lead to a special election. But what surprises me the most about that is that it really isn't too hard to run for a town-wide office. So one of the things I'll compel people to in a civic-minded way is to get out there and run for some of these offices. And I don't want to say it's a shame that there's an open seat out there, but as far as an electorate, somebody walking in voting, the first thing that they're going to think is, it's a shame I don't have anybody that I can check off, or maybe see some lawn signs and have somebody campaigning, meet me at the supermarket and talk about some of the issues. And I'm sure in the Redevelopment Authority there were a couple of issues to do that. Then there's the Shawshene Regional Vocational Technical School Committee. That's a 3-year term. And Robert G. Peterson was the biggest vote getter of the night. And that kind of tells you what probably the amount of people that voted. I'm sure there were some blank ballots out there on that, but 2,650 people turned out. I would have thought that the numbers would have been a little bit bigger, because as I was going around through all of the 4 places where I was going for the polling and had a chance to walk in and see what was going on. It looked pretty brisk right around 11 to noon as I was walking into a couple of the polling places. Do the numbers seem bigger or smaller to you, Carl? Is this a better turnout than you've seen in the past? And I think you've got some numbers from some previous ones. Obviously, we'll probably go with the base number. It was a little over 2,600 people that turned out today.
Right. I actually I added a couple of the different potential amounts of votes that people gave, and it seems that approximately 2,700 people or so voted. It's difficult to be real sure of exactly how many, but if 2,700 people voted, last year 2,200 and change voted, so it does represent significantly more people voted than last year. I would guess that would turn into somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% of the electorate, which is not a bad turnout for Wilmington. Unfortunately, it's kind of a sad statement to say that 25% is what you would expect on a nice day, and you know, 15 or 20% is what you expect on bad weather day. But my guess would be somewhere around the 25% mark.
That's, you know, compared to obviously a presidential election, which usually pulls out the biggest votes, that's been up to in the 70% range statewide. You know, last year, excuse me, well, 2 years ago, last year in the gubernatorial election, that usually gets a little bit lower, and that was probably in the high 60s to low 70s all over Massachusetts, and I don't think Wilmington would be that much different. That's about 1/3 of that. And you know, what surprised me was at two of the polling places, and I'll even go to the one at the town hall, one of the complaints was there was a lot of traffic there. So obviously there was a lot of people going to the baseball field and some of the fields that surround the town hall, and it's not a bad thing if you've got your kids in the car and you see that there's an election going on. You know, after the game, you know, maybe there's a little bit of a line there, but before you head for the ice cream shop, bring the kids through and show them how to vote. Give them a little bit of a civics lesson.
Well, so one thing that I would throw in there, and I have to say, because I went to one polling station over at the near the West School with this morning when I had my daughter in kinder soccer, and I went to the other polling places as well. I was at all three polling places today, and I will say that the town hall, because of its fields and because of just the way it's put together, the parking and all that, it was a little bit, I would say it was the hardest to get into, but every one of the polling places when you went into, the staff was just very friendly. The lines moved very, very quickly. So the actual act of voting was actually very well managed by the town. Like I said, the staff was very, very pleasant, very nice, very helpful. So it was really very easy for anyone who wanted to vote, with the possible exception of driving into the town hall. And I was at the town hall several times, and a lot of it depends on you know, the time of day you went there.
Yeah, well, I had no problem getting a place to park at the town hall the time I went there, and that was right in the middle of most of the games. The one thing you said was, as we get close to wrapping up, the professionalism of the poll workers today was extraordinary. I went in, there were some very young people. I'd say they were anywhere from 18 to 22-year-olds working as poll workers. Usually when you go in, it's a lot of retired people, senior citizens that are helping out, and it was a great mix today. And I saw people going in, checking in, you know, 10, 15 seconds, plenty of open booths. There was always, you know, a couple of them. Nobody was waiting in line. You know, with that optical scanner we talked about a little earlier, you're in and out in a matter of a minute or two. So I'll scold a few people and say you have no reason for not going in there. Obviously the results came in pretty quick tonight. We had a good time wrapping this up, giving you our live coverage right here on WCTV. Carl, I want to thank you for coming in. You did a great job. It's great when you work with somebody that A, has a good opinion, B, says the things that need to be said, and I want to thank you for coming in.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm glad I was able to help out.
Second thing we got to push on is that next Saturday, town meeting. At the high
Absolutely.
school. Absolutely get down there. You just have to be a registered voter. You set the agenda of what the town's going to follow. You decide the business. This puts you right in the boardroom. You don't have Donald Trump saying he can fire you. That's one thing that can't happen. You're in charge. You get to make the votes, and you get to decide to the things that the town's going to do in the next year. Then it's up to the school committee and the Board of Selectmen that you voted for today to do the business for you on a day-to-day basis. But you set the agenda, and that's very, very important for you. Want to thank everybody that's watching out there. It's been a pleasure to bring you the results. My name is Mike Morrissey. I'm your community, I got to find out what we have there, Community Outreach Director here at WCTV. I'm going to give a plug to WCTV here and to say that if you have any ideas about programming, we've got some new people in town that are doing some things politically. You want to do a talk show, please come and get a hold of me down here at WCTV. Be happy to show you everything from a cooking show to a talk show, coverage of Pinewood Derby, you name it. We're happy to teach you exactly how to do the video production and editing. A lot of people can do it in their own homes right now with their own home video cameras and their computers. Be happy to work with you on that. Please come in and give us a hand. Help us if you want to come down and volunteer next Saturday for the town meeting coverage. You can actually go to the town meeting and help us at the same time and do a double civic responsibility. I'm going to wrap it up now. I've had a lot of help from a lot of people behind the scenes. Franklin Tucker, I want to thank him for his color commentary. Bill Robert, who's in the control room behind me. Ron, Don, I'm blanking on last names. It's always the worst thing. Should have wrote them down. Okay. I heard it screamed out behind me. Hopefully that got in there. I didn't hear it. And Walter also down there. He's up there doing the board. Thank you on the audio. And it's been great to do this. Let's wrap it up. Thank you again tonight. And have a good evening. Congratulations to the winners.